It's my privilege and pleasure to introduce to you the winner of this year's Matilda White Riley Award. But let me tell you a little bit about Dr. Riley first. Dr. Matilda White Riley, from my reading, was a Renaissance woman. I wish I'd known her. She was born a little more than a century ago, 1911 in Boston, Massachusetts, was reared in Brunswick, Maine, and attended Brunswick High School, where she met her husband, Jack W. Riley. In 1931, she earned her bachelor's degree and later a master's degree from Radcliffe College in Cambridge, Massachusetts. That same year, she and Jack married, and they remained married for 69 years until his death in 2002. Unfortunately, she followed him a couple of years after that. She had a brilliant career in the worlds of academia, foundations, market research, and then settled back in Brunswick at Bowdoin College as the first woman full professor in 1970. Upon her departure, a building was named in her honor there. She became an NIH scientist in 1979 and was here from 1979 to approximately 2000, during which time she was associate director at the National Institute on Aging for Behavioral and Social Research. She was a member of the National Academy of Sciences. She was a prolific writer and a leader of a number of the key organizations in behavioral and social research. Within NIH, she provided leadership across NIH in her role as chairperson of several landmark committees in behavioral and social research. She was co-chair of the joint ADAMHA and NIH steering committee for the IOM project on health and behavior from 1979 to 1982, and chair of the Trans-NIH Working Group on Health and Behavior from 1982 to 1991. She served as the senior NIH spokesperson on the behavioral and social sciences, encouraged coordination among NIH institutes, oversaw the production of numerous reports to the Congress on Behavioral and Social Research at NIH, and provided advice to several NIH directors and initiated the Behavioral and Social Research Seminar Series at NIH. As indicated in your brochure, she laid the groundwork for and was the precursor to the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research. On her return to her home in Maine in 2000, Dr. Ruth Kirstein, who was then the acting director of NIH, noted that the National Institutes of Health deeply appreciates the contribution of Dr. Riley during her tenure at NIH. She's a scientist of courage and vision and would be greatly missed. Women entering the fields of sociology and aging have fewer professional barriers to surmount, in part because of her pioneering work. She embraced a number of values in her research: strong linkages among theory, methods, and research topics and goals, recognition of complexity of dynamic interplay among processes at multiple levels of explanation, encouragement of research on behavioral and social factors in physical health and of the application of such knowledge in clinical practice and health policy, advocacy of life course perspective, both at the level of individuals and of societies, emphasis on the potential for improving the lives of people in society, conceptual expansion of health beyond biological outcomes to include effective functioning such as cognitive, affective, and social functioning and quality of life, and an optimistic view of the ability of social and behavioral science to develop interventions to improve the lives of people at all ages. So who better than Dr. Linda Waite to be the recipient of this year's Matilda White Riley Award? Sharing with you from the document that was used for Dr. Waite's nomination, I will say that Dr. Waite is the Lucy Flower Professor of Urban Sociology at the University of Chicago and is an internationally renowned scholar best known for her work on marriage and the family. She has had several significant scientific leadership positions, including President of the Population Association of America, chair of several sections and committees of the American Sociological Association, the Advisory Committee to the NIH Director, the National Academy of Sciences Committee on Population, the National Academy of Sciences Committee on a Research Agenda for the Social Psychology of Aging, and she served on many NIH scientific review committees. She's currently a member of the Board of Advisors of the Division of Behavioral and Social Sciences and Education, member of the Committee on Population of the National Research Council, chair of the NAS panel on new directions in the social demography, social epidemiology, and sociology of aging, the principal investigator of the National Social Life, Health, and Aging Project, and she also directs a training grant as well as a National Institute on Aging Demography Center at University of Chicago. Dr. Waite was fortunate enough to know Dr. Riley and has a history of scholarship that reflects several of the values that are central to this award. First, her research exhibits a life course perspective, demonstrated both by her work on the impact of childhood and adult socioeconomic status on physical, mental, and cognitive well-being in later life, as well as a significant grant history with both the National Institute on Aging and the National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. Second, her research on the connections between marriage and emotional, economic, and physical well-being show both significant linkages to theory and methods, and also an interdisciplinary approach to complex research questions. Third, her work on the biosocial mechanisms through which relationships affect health over the life course demonstrate her recognition of the complexity of and dynamic interplay among processes at multiple levels. Because of Dr. Waite's significant accomplishments in these areas, she was seen to be an exceptional candidate for the Matilda White Riley Award. Quite honestly, in many ways, she seems to replicate Dr. Riley. The only thing I wonder is whether she's also a pilot. So I don't know if she's going to address that during her speech, but I'm going to ask Dr. Waite to come forward, please.
Wonderful. So you get down. We're supposed to get a picture. Okay. I had no idea. Okay.
This is good. All right, ready? And looking here. Good. And then one more. Hold it. 1, 2, and 3. Good. Thank you. Okay. Great.
I had no idea. That's gorgeous.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction. And I had no idea I was going to get this this beautiful award, and now I have to get it on the plane and back to Chicago. I'm just delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to give this lecture in honor of Matilda White Riley. You have heard some of this, but I have a picture. And I just wanted to say a couple of things about Matilda before I started. And two of the ideas that popped out at me that I wanted to mention was that she really developed and popularized the idea that cohorts are very important. That's obviously important to a demographer, that the experiences that groups of people have early in their lives at foundational periods affect how they age. And the second is that Matilda was one of the first people to really seriously point to the importance of the connections between social relationships and health. And you've heard all of this just in the introduction, but Matilda was the president of the American Sociological Association in the mid-'80s. I heard her presidential address, which was very important, but in addition, she spoke often to groups, especially groups of young scholars, telling them about the early days of especially the American Sociological Association and how she and Jack had everything on file cards and drove across the country to the meetings. Very different than things are now, but she was absolutely foundational in this field of study and in sociology generally. So what we know is that social connections are strongly associated with health, and this includes physical health, emotional health, cognitive health, and longevity, and I'm going to at least touch on all of these. So I thought I'd start by reviewing for myself as much as anything how I became interested in the link between social connections and health. And this started with the project that I did with my colleague Lee Lillard, Alav Hashalom, in which we traced the probability that people died over about a 20-year period as they moved into and out of marriages. We looked at the chances they died in any year that they were married and how that probability changed. Then we predicted the probability of survival, and that's what these show. So if you take a group of 100 people in each of these marital statuses, what's the probability they'll survive? And what you can see for females is that married women are much more likely to survive to age 65 than especially divorced and never married. With widowed, not so different. Oops. I have to now manage 2 pieces of equipment, so forgive me. Uh-oh. This is what it looks like for men, and what you can see is the same basic pattern, but widowed men don't do very well, and there are huge differences. So the question that I needed to answer when we got these results to write the paper was, what is going on? Why, how does this happen? And I'm sorry, I'm having... So how do social connections affect health? And there are a bunch of mechanisms. I'm sure all of you have thought of more, but social connections affect behaviors. They affect inputs to health, like medical care. We've got recent evidence that, that social connections affect physiological function. I'm going to tell you a little bit about this later. There's been some recent research by my colleague John Cacioppo that social connections and perceptions about them affect gene expression. We have evidence that social connections affect cognitive function, and there's a huge literature on emotional regulation and social connections. So the next step, or years later, a next step was the Social Life Health and Aging Project. And everything I'm going to tell you from here on comes from this project, which we call NSHAP. So NSHAP, the National Social Life Health and Aging Project, has at its heart a nationally representative survey of older adults. They were 57 to 85 in 2005, 2006 when they were first interviewed. We interviewed 3,000 approximately adults this age in their homes. We did about an hour of questionnaire administration and about an hour of biological function, sensory, physiological measures. Then we re-interviewed the same people in 2010, 2011, but in that year we added interviews with their spouses or co-resident partners. So in the second year we have a sample of 3,373. So we have questionnaire measures, we have these biological functional measures, we administered personality and attitude questions in a leave behind, and we got a complete log of all their medications, including over-the-counter and alternative medications. And what we aim to do in this project is first to describe the health of older adults, and then to look at the social pathways through which interpersonal and intimate connections affect health, and the biological, functional, physiological pathways through which social connections affect various aspects of health, and to look at how this differs across social groups, social contexts, social environments. So the theoretical framework that underlies the project is that health is produced in a social context. This could include marriages or intimate relationships, families, households, neighborhoods, local environments, social networks. Any kind of social environment could potentially have an effect on health. That this implies that the people who are poorly socially connected lack some inputs to health. And the result should be that they show this in health functioning and deficits. That networks, thank you, are an important support, an important source of both supports and demands, and this led us to what we call the interactive biopsychosocial model of health, in which our focal individual, our respondent, is connected to a partner or other, could be a family member, could be a child, could be a member of their social network, that when it's an intimate partner, health and sexuality of one affects health and sexuality of the other, especially since sexuality is mostly constructed in dyads. And this happens within a sociocultural context where everyone brings, both people bring, cognitive, psychological, social, and biological physical capital, and that these all affect each other. So, social connections in NSHAP. What I'm going to do is to give you examples, to show you some of the results that we and others have found using these data. The NSHAP data are publicly available to researchers anywhere. You can get them through NACDA at ICPSR. You can just download the data. You only need IRB approval. And we're working on a data set that would be available to anybody who wanted to use it. And I'm going to talk first about what we found about the connection between health and social connections as we usually measure them, we being survey researchers, demographers, which is we ask people, what do you think? Tell us about your health, and then we take their answers as given. And tell me about your social connections, and we take their answers as given. Then I'm going to move to the newer, the different kind of measures, which are more objective measures of functioning and health, and show you the connections between the social world and these physiological measures. I'm going to talk about all of this work is published with the exception of something I'm working on right now, because there had to be something that is just getting started. And it's only going to be a quick overview. It's still moving. I'm not touching anything. I swear I'm not. And it's still moving. So what I'm going to do is just tell you about key results and try and frame them as the type of connection they show between the social world and health. And in almost all these cases, except the last one, you can get the paper if you're interested. Okay, so first I'm going to start with some work that I did with a former graduate student postdoc, Erin York Cornwell. And, we're going to focus here on perceived and objective social isolation and self-reported health. So objective isolation here we measure as living alone, characteristics of one's social network, and social inactivity. Subjective isolation is how one feels about one's social connections. In this case, the perception that relationships with others are low quality, unsatisfying, inadequate in their quantity. And we measure here perceived lack of support, emotionally distant relationships, and loneliness. We scale these in both cases. Here, we're showing you the results of the analysis. This is the predicted probability that an individual reports that their health, using that much-loved self-rated health question, how would you rate your physical health? Excellent, very good, good, fair, or poor. We combined excellent and very good into the best health category, and we use in this case, the objective and the subjective social isolation scales to predict the probability that somebody says their health is terrific. This is objective isolation. And what you can see here is that people who have, now this is a little reversal here. So this is better, right? This is the probability that you say your health is terrific. This is social isolation. So low social isolation is good. High social isolation is bad. And what you see here for objective isolation, a strong and linear relationship so that people who are more socially isolated are less likely to say that their health is terrific. Here it is for subjective isolation. It is exactly the same. These are in the model together. So both of them, separately and independently, are associated with the probability that a person says that their health is terrific. Both of them matter, and they matter separately. This is the same basic approach, but it's for mental health. We ask the same question about mental health as we asked about physical health. How would you rate your emotional health? And then we carry out the same exercise. What you see here is objective isolation has the same sort of relationship. It's not quite as strong, but here's the difference. For mental health, perceived isolation, your evaluation of the quality of your social relationships has a much stronger relationship than objective isolation. So for physical health, they both matter, and we can think about reasons why. But for emotional health, how you feel about the relationships is substantially more important than how you actually measure them, objectively what they are. So the social world is connected to health, it's connected to emotional health and to physical health, but different characteristics of the social world are connected to each of these in different ways that we might expect, I think. Okay, now, objective health outcomes. I'm going to start with a study done by David Sabara at the University of Arizona. I like this study a lot. He used NSHAP data, and one of the measures that we got involved finger stick blood. We collected blood spots from each of the respondents, and then we had them assayed for things that you might have done sort of not with finger stick blood, but with whole blood in your doctor's office during a physical. These included hemoglobin A1C as a measure of glucose metabolism and a number of other measures, including C-reactive protein. C-reactive protein is a measure of systemic inflammation. It's a measure of tissue damage, cell distress. And it's a measure of chronic inflammation, which is thought to underlie cardiovascular disease, cerebrovascular events, and some cancers. So it also is the case that elevated CRP, even modestly elevated, predicts cardiovascular events. So it's a biological, physiological measure of functioning. Higher CRP is not good. It means that, you've got some wear and tear, you've got some unhappy bodily systems. Now, Sabara argues that marriage should be associated with this physiological marker because marital loss causes stress, and stress causes inflammation. So that he focuses on people who have either been widowed or divorced, they should show the physiological effects of the stress of this loss. He also argues that there should be a gender difference in both the returns to marriage and response to marital loss. He argues that, and there is some evidence, that marital loss, divorce, and widowhood are harder on men than on women, partly because men rely on their wives, especially for social and emotional support, in a way that women don't rely on their husbands. Women tend to have other sources of support too, and men tend not to. He also argues, I sort of like this argument, that women shoulder more of the burdens of marriage, that they do more of the work, emotional, physical, and so on, and that women, and this has been shown in a number of very nice studies, show greater physiological responses to marital conflict, blood pressure, galvanic skin response, so that both the unequal burdens and the stress response should disadvantage women, and that these things have physiological costs and reduce the benefits of marriage to women. So this is mean levels of CRP Anything over about 3 is indicative of inflammation. This is for the whole NSHAP sample in wave 1. This is what it looks like for men and women. You can see that the total hid very different levels for the two groups. So women have higher levels, are closer to this indicates a problem level, than men are. And here it is for previously married men and for married men. This is a statistically significant difference. You can see that married men have really, on average, quite low levels of CRP, and previously married men are significantly higher. For women, there's no difference. So what Sabara found really supported his argument that, and we can't know really which of his arguments were right about either responses to marital loss or to the day-to-day wear and tear of marriage, but we do see a difference in physiological function. So this is a way that a social relationship affects physiology pre-disease, before anybody's got any symptoms, but this is an indication of risk for later poor health outcomes. Okay, this is next we're going to turn to hypertension. This is from some of my work with my colleague Erin York Cornwell, and in NSHAP we measured, we got blood. We also measured sort of what you'd get in a doctor's office as just measures of current health. We measured blood pressure in the home. We measured it twice, and if it was divergent, we measured it a third time. We also, and this is one of the things I like best about this project, we also ask people if a doctor or medical professional had ever told them they had any one of a series of diseases, including high blood pressure. So we know if the person says they have been diagnosed. And then we have medications. So we know if people are taking antihypertensives, and we can triangulate. So what we can do is look at people's measured blood pressure. And this is, I know it looks sort of, when I looked at this, I said, can it actually be that exactly half the sample had normal blood pressure and exactly half, and I looked at the numbers, and it's actually 49% are normotensive. We measured them as having normal blood pressure under 140/90, and 51% of the sample we measured as having elevated blood pressure. But because we know whether they were taking medications and whether they were diagnosed, we also know of the normotensives, 23% of them said they had hypertension, but they were not elevated, or they were taking medication, but they were not elevated. So these are people who were appropriately treated medically. They have hypertension, but they have the chronic disease, but their blood pressure is controlled. This is of the people who have measured elevated blood pressure. You can see here that 34% of them said they had hypertension, but their blood pressure was still high. And 17% said they didn't have hypertension. They had never been diagnosed, but their blood pressure was high. Now, hypertension's interesting because it's a mix of the physiological and the social, especially when you're looking at measured blood pressure in the home. People get hypertension because of aging, because of disease, because of wear and tear on the circulatory system. But their blood pressure is controlled or not because they got to a doctor, they got diagnosed, they were adequately treated, and now their blood pressure is under control. So it's an interesting combination of the social and the physiological. What we did here was look at And we looked at all the categories, but here I'm going to show you people who said they had hypertension and or were taking medication, but their blood pressure is not controlled. This is obviously a problematic group. They're being inadequately treated. We hypothesized that, that their network, the network of people around them, could have an effect on whether they got to a doctor, whether they made changes in their diet and behavior, whether they took their medications, whether they got back to the doctor, whether their hypertension was controlled. One of the very nice and I think unusual aspects of NSHAP is that we got a very detailed set of questions, information on social networks. We ask people about people that they talk to about things that are important to them, and we ask about the characteristics of their relationship, where they live, the characteristics of the people, and we ask them how likely they were to talk to each of these people about health. So we look here at the size of the social network and what flows through it, hypothesizing that it could be important, especially for a health outcome that's so socially affected, what kinds of information flows through the social network. So here we have the predicted probability that this person has uncontrolled hypertension, and we're looking at the number of social network members and whether they say they are likely to talk to each of these people about health. For people who say they're not likely, on average, to talk to their social network members about health, the larger their social network, the higher the probability that they have, that we measure them as hypertensive. And it's a pretty strong result. So additional network members are a burden. They're certainly not a benefit for people who don't talk to the network members about health. This is the relationship for people who say they're somewhat likely to talk to network members about health, and you see a much weaker relationship. And this is the relationship for people who are very likely to talk to their network members about health. Each additional network member reduces the chances that these people who talk to them about health are uncontrolled hypertensives. So here's a way that network size affects people's health outcome, but it depends on what flows over that network. So social connections and health, but it depends. Okay, one of the other things we did in NSHAP is that we ask people to rate their sensory function. Rate your vision, rate your hearing, rate your sense of smell, rate your sense of touch. And then for all of those sensory functions, we measured their functionality. We had a vision chart that we taped to the wall, and then we had the interviewer measure 20 feet and had the person sit down and did a little vision exam. So we have both their self-report and we have measured vision, and we have this for all the sensory functions. So we know that declines in vision are quite common at older ages. It's one of the challenges, declines in sensory function generally, including vision. And when people have poor vision, this can become a functional limitation, so they have trouble with the activities of daily living, and it can become a disability. In this article, Bukwala argues that the link between a sensory limitation, a sensory deficit, and functional limitations, like being able to do activities of daily living, should depend on the quality of social relationships. That people who have, in this case, a marriage that is satisfying and supportive should have less of a negative impact of a sensory deficit on their functionality. And here you see this relationship. So this is the functional limitation score. More is worse. People with low satisfaction who have poor vision have more functional limitations than this, and these are people with low relationship satisfaction. So people in relationships they're not so happy with, who have poor vision, have quite high levels of functional limitations. And it's significantly higher than people who have good vision. And this is the relationship for people who have strong marriages. People who have strong marriages basically show no difference between those with poor vision and good vision in the chances of functional limitations, or the level of functional limitations. So poor vision only turns into functional limitations if you don't have a supportive relationship. If you do, it doesn't. Here's what's cool. This is self-reported vision. There's visual acuity, measured vision. It's the same relationship, the same finding. So it's how people feel about their vision, but it's also exactly the same relationship for measured vision, which gives us a little bit more confidence in the results. And here's the same basic analysis done for depressive symptoms. So poor vision is associated with depressive symptoms, especially for people who have poor relationships. So social relationships affect the disablement process, but it depends on the quality of the social relationships. Okay, and here's the last measure I want to tell you about. This is the only analysis that I'm going to tell you about that hasn't been published. We are just working on this now. One of my colleagues, William Dale, who's head of geriatric medicine at the University of Chicago and is an MD, PhD in the social sciences, was very concerned, works on cognitive function, and was very concerned about the role of cognition in health and health declines. So he and his research team modified a clinical measure of cognitive function, the Montreal Cognitive Assessment, that's very commonly used for administration to survey respondents. And we gave a 10-minute cognitive function test to every single one of our respondents. We trained the interviewers to do these, the cognitive function exam. And then for many of the components, we brought the interviews back and had them coded by researchers on the team. There are 8 dimensions in both the Montreal Cognitive Assessment and the Chicago Cognitive Function Measure. These include orientation, time, date, where are you, naming, that's a rhinoceros. One of the first things that seems to be affected by aging is it's word retrieval, but specifically names of things, because it's abstract and not inherent in the thing. There's also this trails. Just give yourself a little test here. So you're supposed to start at 1, you go number, letter, number, letter, number, letter, number, letter. And it's a measure of executive function and attention. Then people also draw a clock, which is one of the hardest things to do. They're supposed to draw an analog, not a digital clock. They're supposed to do it without looking at a clock, and they're supposed to do it for a specific time that's a little hard. I think it's 10 minutes after 11. And they're supposed to get it round, get all the numbers on, and get the hands right. This was given to each of the respondents, and these are the results. They're really just coming out of our research group now. This is social, and these are the mean values on the cognitive function test. It's scored 0 to 20, and this is net of, these are predicted net of education, all the other variables in the model, age, education, race, gender, assets, and health. So what you see here, I mentioned this before, is the decline in cognitive function, measured cognitive function with age. It's really pretty substantial. It happens all the way along. And we don't know at this point anything to do to slow it or reverse it. Cognitive function is also connected to education. People with more education do better at any age in any other set of circumstances. And then I'm going to flip you to this one. This is race and ethnicity differences, which are pretty substantial. And remember, this is net of education, net of age, net of gender, and so on. And then this is the one that we're excited about, because I think this is much less known. And this is social network size. And you see a significant relationship between the size of the social network and the score on the cognitive function measure. Remember, it's net of everything else. It's really a difference between 0, 1, and 2, and 3 or more. But it's there, and it's very significant. Of course, it's probably the case that having a rich social environment helps maintain many kinds of cognitive function, and that as cognitive function starts to decline, people draw in, that they are less able to maintain a large and complicated social network. So what I've tried to do here is to show you some recent results on the connections between various dimensions of social relationships, including objective and perceived social isolation, marriage, and marital quality, and social networks, the information that flows across them, and social network size, and different dimensions of health, including perceptions of physical and emotional health, measured hypertension, measured systemic inflammation, measured vision, and measured cognition. And what you can see is how in some cases, there's a direct relationship between the social world and some aspect of health. In other cases, social relationships mediate or moderate the relationship between some dimension of health and another dimension of health, or between characteristics of the person and health. So it's complicated and it depends, but it's also fascinating, and in all of these cases, it makes an enormous amount of sense when you look at the relationships and think about the ways that the social world affects health. And the functioning of social relationships moderates the effects. So, this is a very exciting time to be studying anything about the social world and health. It's true because we have more and better, richer measures of both social relationships, social networks, social connections, social demands, social supports, and health. And we have more and richer information on health itself, health behaviors, physiological and functional health, and of course, morbidity and mortality, which I haven't talked about here. Clearly, Matilda White Riley was an important foundational thinker in this area. She laid the groundwork for a lot of the work that's going on now. And I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about these ideas and my project. Thank you.
I'll share this with you. My understanding is that we have a few minutes for questions, so if people would come to the microphones and provide whatever questions you might have. First question I have is, can you tell us a little bit about what happens, or does your data address, what happens if an individual had a long period of time when they were not married and then they went into a committed relationship? What do your data show about that?
Well, I have some other work on that, but that uses the HRS, so I can't talk about it. We don't, nobody has done anything like that on these data that I know of. I have done work on other data, and there is, it is partly an exposure process. So the longer people are married, the more health benefits they get, but it also seems to be a stress response that marital loss is costly, emotionally and physically.
Hi, thank you. I'm wondering if there are any studies on increasing physical and emotional awareness, such as by mindfulness or meditation practice, and how that might affect outcomes perhaps in different marital statuses or different social connection groups.
Okay, let me repeat that because I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you very clearly. You were asking about practices like meditation?
Yeah, anything that would help enhance awareness of the physical state. I wondered if there was any sense of whether people who...
I haven't done any research on that, but we do get information on alternative medical practices, massage therapy, chiropractic, meditation, and so the data are available. Be great to see some analyses of them, but I haven't seen anything. The data do exist, though.
Does it have to be actual formal marriage, or do you see the same thing with cohabitation, for example, or other kinds of romantic relationships?
Well, Sabara actually didn't, as far as I know, didn't look at cohabitations. We have about, I think, 60 cohabiting couples. Remember, this is sort of your grandparents or your older parents. This is mostly a cohort that's has a fairly traditional marriage experience. So we do have some cohabitors. There aren't very many. We also ask about people who had romantic partnerships, that people that they had a romantic relationship, not necessarily sexual, with whom they did not live, and there are actually more of those than there are cohabitors. And other people using other data sets have compared cohabitors and married people, and cohabitors do get some of the benefits, the health benefits of marriage, but Sabara didn't do that in his paper.
Thank you so much for an excellent talk.
Thank you.
The very last slide, the cognitive functioning about Black and Hispanics. I'm wondering whether or not you have any ideas of what might be going into that, and if you have other measures or other plans to evaluate that. Many people feel that being ethnic minority in America is stressful, and whether or not you're going to see an elevation on C-reactive proteins and things like that as well, and if you have a measure of discrimination.
One could certainly do that. One could certainly measure physiological stress and wear and tear. And other evidence, not from this data set, does suggest that on average, black men and women show higher levels of stress response, wear and tear at any age than otherwise similar whites. And nobody's done anything on the cognitive measure yet. We absolutely will.
Very nice talk. How much research has been done on the health effects of kids on their parents and on grandkids?
I haven't done any, and I don't think anybody has used this data set, but Esther Friedman at Harvard is doing some work on that now, putting together a data set with Rob Mayer. And what she finds and what she argues is that, I just read this so it's fresh in my mind, that especially at older ages, that people with highly educated children are advantaged because those children could provide support, maybe information, maybe care, maybe networks of others who could help with medical care in a situation of a stroke or some kind of disease, so that what she finds is that people with highly educated children live longer. But nobody's done anything like that with these data. But yes, if you pick accomplished, highly educated children, it's some return on your investment.
Well, please join me in again thanking Dr. Waite for a lovely talk.
Can I take this and go? Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. That was a wonderful job. We just have a few more things we're going to do today. We're going to go out and have a poster session in just a while. This is a great event. It'll be an opportunity for you to get to know one another a little bit better and see what's going on in some of the ICs. But before we do that, we have a very special event this afternoon. We'd like to honor some of the social and behavioral science pioneers here at the NIH. And we're taking the opportunity to honor two very special people in our community. The first is Virginia Kane, and I think that many of you know Virginia. Virginia has been someone who's been there for behavioral and social sciences research at the NIH from the very beginning. She was one of the founders of the Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. She was the very first deputy director. She's done all sorts of things over the years to keep this effort going. For example, she was instrumental in establishing the basic behavioral and social sciences program, OPNET. She served as the deputy director of OBSSR from its founding in 1995 all the way through 2005. And as part of that, she served as acting director for several years. She worked at the NIH more than 20 years, and she assumed a variety of different leadership roles at the Office of Research on Women's Health, NICHD, and then finally at OBSSR. Virginia now has gone on to be the inaugural director of extramural research at CDC's National Center for Health Statistics. So, Virginia, please come up. Oops. So great. Pardon? Oh. So we've asked Virginia to say a few words, and also, is Dana here? We'll catch up in just a minute. We have a special plaque as well, but we'll move it behind schedule. So first of all, let me...
Thank you. I'm delighted to be honored today, and coming home, just walking over here, it felt like coming home, seeing a lot of the people in the audience that I've worked with over the years. I'm spending my time mainly in this federal statistical system these days, but there isn't a single day that goes by that we don't use behavioral and social science research. Whether it's in deciding what are the key things that we need to take a look at in our surveys, determining how to measure things, gaining cooperation from the respondents, or disseminating our materials. What I thought I'd talk about today, just very briefly, is a couple of things that I have been working on where we have been both collaborating with the NIH as well as using behavioral and social science in a very important way. The first thing that I'd like to mention that many of you have been involved in one way or another actually, is our work on measuring sexual minority status. There's been increased pressure to measure sexual minority status in federal surveys, both by advocacy groups and the administration, but it's not so easy as you might think. We've been in a lengthy development process excuse me, to develop questions that we can put on our national surveys. And we have gone through an extensive cognitive interviewing session as well as a major nationally representative pretest. We're about ready to evaluate that research and with the aim of putting it questions measuring lesbian, gay, and bisexual status on our national health interview survey. Excuse me. Within that, we have counted on the techniques of behavioral and social science research. We've used heavily cognitive interviewing to determine how to ask the questions. It really is ultimately it's an inherently behavioral question. How does the person's identity affect the choices that they make, the behaviors that they engage in, and ultimately their health? What you may notice that is missing from that, which I regard as an emerging issue that we're going to need some help from the research at NIH, is measuring transgender status. It's even more complex than measuring LGB status. And I know that we're not quite ready at this point to do that at a national level on our surveys, but we're really relying on some of the basic research that NIH does to develop what are the key components that we need to measure and techniques for doing that. Another area that I'd like to just mention follows very nicely on some of the work that Linda had presented, which is measuring relationships, household relationships. Again, working with NIH colleagues in this, as well as other colleagues across the federal government, on how to measure households' relationships, particularly same-sex relationships. This arose out of some work that was showing people reporting same-sex marriages prior to the legalization of same-sex marriage. So what were people reporting? Clearly they were reporting on something, whether it was, there was some evidence that some of it was an error, simply a methodological issue, but not all of it. People were clearly reporting on commitment ceremonies, perhaps, domestic partnerships, other kinds of relationships, and in fact, some were actually marriages that took place elsewhere. But that's been a real challenge as to how you measure those relationships, and I think that that's an important thing for us to understand so that we can understand whether people are going to be receiving the same kinds of benefits from those relationships that Linda has been describing this afternoon. I'd also like to mention just a third area that I have been involved with considerably, which is the issue of trying to obtain data on disaggregated minority racial and ethnic minority groups. There's certainly a trend towards wanting finer and finer gradations in the ethnic groups that we can collect data on, but I can assure you that it's a real struggle, even with the sample sizes that we have at NCHS, and our largest survey is the Health Interview Survey, which I think this year and next year will have 127,000 people in it. Not a lot of surveys can match that, and we continue to struggle to find, to be able to produce data on some of the smaller racial and ethnic groups. So I sort of want to go back to something that Linda said, that the question really is not so much what is it about being part of that disaggregated group, but what is it, why and how do these things happen that result in the differences that we can see in health outcomes. And I think that that's a very behavioral science question, is trying to understand that, which can then help us with our large-scale surveys in measuring the right things. So that just touches on some of the things that I have been working on. As an agency, we have many, many collaborations with NIH. NHANES, many of you are familiar with, that we collaborate regularly with the various NIH institutes. The Health Interview Survey, certainly we've had collaborations with many, many institutes, from measuring complementary and alternative medicines. We've had a couple of modules on that. We're working on the sexual identity with the NIH on those. We've worked with NICHD for many, many years on the National Survey of Family Growth. So we have continuing long-standing relationships with the NIH and regard them as very important. So I think I'll just wrap it up there and thank you all. I really appreciate this, and it's really wonderful to be back.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you.
So we have this plaque for Virginia that's to Virginia Kane in recognizing her excellence for contributions to behavioral and social sciences research. It's a pleasure. Maybe you step over here. Okay. So there we go. Thank you, Virginia. It's terrific to have someone who understands the NIH so well over at the National Center for Health Statistics, and we look forward to continued collaborations. It's really my pleasure now to present this next award. I think many of you know Norman. So the next award goes to Norman Anderson. Norman was a very distinguished investigator at Duke University back in the late 80s, early 1990s. Where he was studying the role of race, discrimination, stress, and stress reactivity in hypertension and cardiovascular disease. But in 1995, somehow Norman was talked into leaving his lab at Duke and migrating up to Washington, where he became the founding director of the Office of Behavioral and Social Science Research and the first NIH Associate Director for the Behavioral and Social Sciences. At the time, he was asked to facilitate behavioral and social sciences across the NIH. This was a new role, and he was asked to coordinate these activities across the 24 institutes and centers at the NIH. So it must have been much simpler back then with just 24 institutes. His work helped in a variety of different ways, and I think it's worth saying that Norman made remarkable contributions to the OBSSR. Among other things, during the years that Norman was the director, the budget tripled. And he achieved recognition for the behavioral and social sciences at the NIH that hadn't existed before that. But in the year 2000, after just a couple years, or about 5 years at the NIH, he was persuaded to take a job as professor of health and social behavior at Harvard. And then in 2003, he became the chief executive officer at the American Psychological Association. And I think all of you know that the American Psychological Association is the largest and oldest psychological association, actually one of the largest and most influential academic societies in the world. At APA, and in addition to all of his other roles, overseeing, among other things, a substantial publishing industry at the APA, he was the editor-in-chief of the 2-volume Encyclopedia of Health and Behavior, and he serves as editor-in-chief of the American Psychologist, probably the most widely circulated psychological science journal in the world. And he has been honored on many different occasions. So it's an honor for us to honor Norman, but in fact, this is not the first time he's been honored. I noticed that in addition to his own PhD, he actually has 3 other doctoral degrees that have been awarded to him on an honorary basis. Norman continues to serve the NIH as a member of the Council for the National Institutes on Aging. And it's really a pleasure for me to say that just 1 week ago today, it was announced publicly that Norman has been elected to the Institute of Medicine of the National Academy of Sciences. So Norman, it's a great pleasure to have you here and to welcome you back to the NIH.
All right. Well, thank you, Bob, and it's just really special for me to be recognized by NIH, mainly because this is really my community, the Behavioral and Social Science Research community at NIH. I mean, when you work at a place every day, it's just where you work, and it becomes over time nothing special. But those of you who work here, you should realize this is really a special place to be. Largely because of the mission of NIH is so important internationally, but also because of the types of people who work here and how dedicated and talented you are to improving the health of the nation. I just want to say a couple of words about the early days of OBSSR. This is not going to be a walking to school barefoot in the snow 10 miles kind of speech, but it was kind of like that. You know, OBSSR in its infancy really on the surface, at least superficially, didn't appear to have much going for it. Back in 1995, actually the authorizing legislation was approved by Congress in 93. It took a while for the office to open. And really the top challenge is, many of you may recall, while NIH funded hundreds of millions, even billions of dollars in behavioral and social sciences research, it wasn't necessarily a priority for NIH to have an Office of Behavioral and Social Sciences Research. So there was a tremendous amount of skepticism about the office, how it would work, what it would do. Just beginning with the staff complement. Initially, there were 2 of us. There was Virginia Kane, who was just up here, and me. That was OBSSR. In 1995, we had a tremendous budget of all of $2 million to work with. As I mentioned, there was skepticism across campus and the nation about what we were doing. In fact, we were lucky if there was skepticism, because most people nationally, most of the people we were serving the behavioral and social science extramural community had never heard of OBSSR, didn't know it existed. So one of our tasks early on was a communications task to the extramural community to say, there's this thing called OBSSR, and we're here to help you accomplish your goals in terms of research funding. And we had obviously a large mandate, as Bob mentioned, but very little authority to tell ICs what to do with respect to funding. So the question is, how are you going to advance the field? And one of the first things we did, and something that has been done at least 2 other times, is have a strategic planning conference where we brought together this great community as well as folks from the outside to help guide us. What do we want this office to be, and what do we want it to do? We also had a very interesting early task of defining what we mean by behavioral and social science research. What is that? And we had a series of workshops where we actually shaped a definition of the field that I think actually continues to guide how you assess funding. But so despite those challenges, we had two main things going for us. One of which obviously is the science, and that's obvious. But the other two things we had going for us, first of all, was you. We had this incredible community. It was just two of us on staff to start with, and we were able to attract other staff through details and IPAs, but what we really had was 400 or 500 behavioral and social science researchers, scientists in this community who really embraced the office, who welcomed me as an outsider into this incredible family. And really, that's the main reason the office had any success at all and was able to establish some credibility on campus. It was because of the collaborations with the behavioral and social science community on campus. And really, the other thing we had going for us is the basic philosophy of the office. And the basic philosophy of the office at the time was, to paraphrase and modify John F. Kennedy, was ask not what NIH can do for behavioral and social sciences research, ask what behavioral and social sciences research can do for NIH. Because we believed that we had much to offer the larger mission of NIH, which was to fund and conduct research to improve the health of the country. And as long as we kept our focus on that, it wasn't really about us, it was really about the NIH mission. I think we were able to establish strong credibility on campus, and clearly that remains the focus. When you hear presentations like Dr. Waits, when you just look at the literature to see all the exciting things going on in the behavioral and social sciences research, we really still have very, very much to offer the NIH mission. So I congratulate you on all that you do for NIH, and again, thank you for this great honor.
So Norman, it's a pleasure to offer you the certificate recognizing Norman for his excellence and contributions to behavioral and social sciences research. So. Well, thank you, Virginia and Norman. Thank you again for all the contributions you've made to behavioral and social sciences research at the NIH. The remaining item on our agenda today is the poster session. The institutes and centers were asked if they'd like to contribute posters, and a good number of them did. Those posters are up on the second floor, and I think this is also a good opportunity for you to mingle with one another. You might take this opportunity to reach out and introduce yourself to someone that you didn't know before this particular retreat. The original plan, the first plan was to serve wine and cheese during this reception, and that didn't work out. Our second plan was to serve water and cookies, and that was also not a successful proposal. So there are drinking fountains around somewhere, but I believe that the cafeteria is now closed, but we'll make up for it with good spirit. Again, thanks again for participating. Linda, thank you for a wonderful lecture, and anyway, we'll see you all upstairs.